Trump's brutal 35% tariffs on Canada just triggered a secret alliance with Mexico that could shatter America's entire trade dominance. What happens next will shock you. Let's begin. Canada just pulled off the ultimate chess move that could destroy America's entire North American trade strategy. August 1st, 2025 was supposed to be Trump's moment of triumph.
The August 1st is there for everyone. The deals all start on August 1st.
His self-imposed deadline for new trade deals had arrived, and he was ready to show the world that America's tariff threats would bring every nation to heel. But what happened next exposed the fatal flaw in Trump's entire strategy. While Trump slammed Canada with devastating 35% tariffs, up from 25%, claiming they had failed to cooperate on fentanyl and immigration, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum walked away with something no other country had achieved: a complete 90-day reprieve from Trump's threatened 30% tariffs. The contrast was stunning and deliberate. Canada, America's largest trading partner and closest ally, was being punished with the harshest tariffs. Mexico, despite facing identical fentanyl and immigration concerns, got a free pass to negotiate. But Trump had no idea that his decision to play favorites was about to backfire spectacularly.
Canada is looking to boost trade with other North American trading partners, namely Mexico.
What Trump didn't know was that Canada had been preparing for exactly this scenario. While he was focused on his public threats and Twitter storms, Canadian officials were quietly building alternative partnerships that would make his tariffs irrelevant. The most dangerous of these partnerships was happening right under his nose, with the very country he had just rewarded. The warning signs were everywhere, but Trump's team was too focused on their public relations victories to notice the strategic disaster unfolding. When Canada's Trade Minister, Dominic LeBlanc, returned from Washington empty-handed on August 1st, it was exactly according to plan. "We're prepared to stick around and do the work needed," LeBlanc said publicly, maintaining the facade of diplomatic cooperation. But behind the scenes, Canadian Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand were already packing their bags for an urgent trip to Mexico City. The timing was no coincidence. Just days after Trump rewarded Mexico with its 90-day reprieve while punishing Canada, Canadian officials were heading south for what they called routine discussions. But sources familiar with the planning revealed these were anything but routine talks. Canada had been watching Trump's divide-and-conquer strategy with growing alarm. The president's decision to give Mexico preferential treatment while crushing Canada with higher tariffs created an obvious opportunity. If Trump wanted to play favorites in North America, Canada would show him the true cost of that strategy. The genius of Canada's approach was its subtlety. While Trump was celebrating his tough stance on Canada in public rallies, promising his base that tariffs were making America rich again, Canadian officials were quietly building the infrastructure for an economic alliance that would bypass the United States entirely. Mexico, despite receiving Trump's temporary favor, was well aware that the 90-day reprieve was just that, temporary. Sheinbaum's government knew that eventually they too would face Trump's tariff hammer. The smart play was to build alternative trade relationships before that hammer fell. Make sure to subscribe if you like our videos. The bombshell dropped on August 3rd when the Globe and Mail reported that Canadian ministers were heading to Mexico City for 2 days of intensive trade discussions. But this was the unveiling of a strategy that would fundamentally reshape North American trade. The meeting agenda, leaked by sources familiar with the planning, revealed the scope of Canada's ambitions. This was about building a comprehensive Canada-Mexico trade corridor that would reduce both countries' dependence on the increasingly unreliable U.S. market. The brilliance of the timing cannot be overstated. While Trump was celebrating his tough stance on Canada and his smart deal with Mexico, the two countries were using his own strategy against him. Mexico's 90-day reprieve gave both nations a perfect window to establish new trade relationships before Trump could interfere. But the real genius was in the substance of what Canada was offering. Unlike Trump's threats and ultimatums, Canada came to Mexico City with concrete proposals that addressed Mexico's long-term economic interests: energy partnerships, agricultural trade deals, and manufacturing cooperation agreements that would benefit both countries while reducing their vulnerability to Trump's tariff wars. The psychological impact on Trump was immediate and devastating. His strategy of rewarding Mexico while punishing Canada was supposed to demonstrate American power. Instead, it had driven his two biggest neighbors into each other's arms. The very countries he needed to maintain American dominance in North America were now plotting to circumvent American markets entirely. Trade analysts immediately recognized the significance. Canada's $412 billion in annual trade with the U.S. and Mexico's massive manufacturing base could create a trade bloc that would rival the European Union in scope and scale. Most importantly, this bloc would be specifically designed to reduce dependence on the unpredictable American market. The most devastating aspect for Trump was the optics. Here was the self-proclaimed master negotiator, whose strategy had literally driven his neighbors to unite against him. Instead of bringing Mexico and Canada to heel separately, he had created the conditions for them to join forces against American economic interests. Trump's reaction was swift and predictable. Within hours of the Mexico meeting news breaking, he took to social media with a furious rant about unfair partnerships and disloyal neighbors. But his anger only highlighted how completely he had misread the situation. The immediate economic implications were staggering. Canada accounts for roughly $350 billion in U.S. exports annually, while Mexico represents even more. A coordinated Canada-Mexico trade strategy could potentially redirect hundreds of billions of dollars away from American suppliers and toward each other. American businesses that had been counting on Trump's divide-and-conquer strategy to maintain their competitive advantages suddenly faced a nightmare scenario. Instead of playing Canada and Mexico against each other for better deals, U.S. companies now had to compete against a potentially unified northern trade bloc. The agricultural sector felt the impact first. Canadian farmers, facing Trump's crushing tariffs, now had a massive new market in Mexico for their wheat, canola, and other exports. Mexican manufacturers, worried about future U.S. tariffs, could source raw materials and components from Canada instead of American suppliers. Most painfully for Trump, his decision to give Mexico a 90-day reprieve had handed Canada the perfect opportunity to lock in long-term agreements before those reprieved tariffs could take effect. Instead of Mexico using those 90 days to negotiate with America from a position of weakness, they were using the time to build alternatives to American dependence. Financial markets reacted with concern about the long-term implications for American trade dominance. The U.S. dollar weakened against both the Canadian dollar and Mexican peso, as investors recognized that Trump's strategy might have permanently damaged America's position in North American trade. The political fallout was immediate. Republican senators from border states demanded explanations for how Trump's America First strategy had managed to drive America's two largest neighbors into a potentially hostile alliance. Even Fox News began questioning whether the president's tough stance had backfired. The Canada-Mexico meetings in Mexico City represent more than just a diplomatic response to Trump's tariffs. They mark the beginning of a fundamental realignment of North American economic power that could persist long after Trump leaves office. Canada's strategy is particularly sophisticated because it exploits the inherent contradictions in Trump's approach. By treating Mexico more favorably than Canada, Trump created an obvious incentive for both countries to work together. Instead of competing for American favor, they're now collaborating to reduce their dependence on American markets entirely. The energy implications alone are staggering. Canada's vast oil, gas, and renewable energy resources could power Mexico's growing manufacturing sector, reducing Mexico's dependence on American energy imports. In return, Mexico's manufacturing capacity could provide Canada with finished goods that they currently import from the United States. What makes this partnership particularly devastating for Trump is the geographic reality. The U.S. sits directly between Canada and Mexico, meaning any deepening of their trade relationship would naturally create new transportation corridors and infrastructure that bypasses American territory entirely. Canadian officials are already discussing direct shipping routes through the Pacific that would connect Canadian ports to Mexican facilities without touching American soil. The mineral wealth exchange represents another massive blow to American industry. Canada's abundant copper, aluminum, and rare earth deposits could supply Mexico's electronics and automotive manufacturing without any American intermediaries. Mexico's silver and lithium reserves could flow north to support Canada's growing clean energy sector. These are precisely the critical minerals that Trump's administration has identified as essential to American economic security. More strategically, a Canada-Mexico partnership could fundamentally alter the dynamics of the USMCA trade agreement. Instead of the U.S. being the dominant partner negotiating with two smaller neighbors, America could find itself facing a coordinated Canada-Mexico bloc that collectively represents a larger economy than the United States. The agricultural transformation could be equally profound. Canada's grain exports and Mexico's agricultural labor force create natural synergies that could replace American agricultural imports to both countries. American farmers, already devastated by Trump's tariff wars, could lose two of their most important markets simultaneously. The manufacturing implications cut even deeper. Mexico's lower labor costs, combined with Canada's technological expertise and stable currency, could create production chains that eliminate the need for American components entirely. Auto parts manufactured in Mexico using Canadian steel and aluminum could flow north for final assembly, creating a completely integrated North American supply chain that excludes the United States. Financial markets are already pricing in these possibilities. The Mexican peso has strengthened against the dollar following news of the Canada talks, while Canadian banking stocks have surged on speculation about new lending opportunities in Mexico. American multinational corporations are quietly reassessing their North American strategies, recognizing that they may soon face a unified competitor bloc rather than fragmented individual markets. Perhaps most significantly, the Canada-Mexico partnership demonstrates to other countries that there are alternatives to submission to Trump's tariff threats. If America's two closest neighbors can successfully unite against U.S. economic pressure, other countries around the world will take note and potentially follow suit. The technology transfer possibilities represent another strategic nightmare for the United States. Canada's advanced AI and clean energy technologies, combined with Mexico's manufacturing scale, could create innovation hubs that compete directly with Silicon Valley and Detroit. Mexican engineers could work alongside Canadian researchers to develop products that serve global markets without any American involvement. The psychological impact on American soft power cannot be overstated. For decades, the United States has maintained global influence partly through its ability to manage relationships with allies and partners. Trump's ham-fisted approach to Canada and Mexico has demonstrated that American threats can be countered through strategic cooperation among targeted countries. Looking ahead, the Canada-Mexico partnership could become a template for other regions facing American economic pressure. The European Union, Asian countries, and South American nations are all watching to see whether coordinated resistance to Trump's tariffs can be more effective than individual submission. The timeline advantage also heavily favors Canada and Mexico. While Trump's policies could change with future elections, the infrastructure and relationships being built now could persist for decades. Trade agreements, transportation networks, and industrial partnerships developed during this period would be extremely difficult for any future American administration to unravel. The ultimate irony is that Trump's America First strategy has achieved exactly the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of making America more dominant in North American trade, it has driven America's neighbors to create alternatives to American dominance. Instead of bringing jobs back to America, it has created incentives for Canada and Mexico to trade with each other, rather than the United States. Trump promised to make better deals for America, but his approach has instead given Canada and Mexico the motivation and opportunity to make better deals with each other. The president, who claimed to be the ultimate negotiator, has managed to negotiate himself out of relevance in his own backyard. As the Canada-Mexico partnership develops, Trump faces a strategic nightmare of his own making. His attempt to use tariffs as leverage has instead created a unified opposition that is stronger than either country would have been alone. The master of the art of the deal has taught his neighbors that the best way to deal with American pressure is to not deal with America at all. If you want more latest news on politics, make sure to subscribe to our channel.